you so much. So now we have some time for questions and discussion. So anyone, please feel free to ask anything, even like something you didn't understand, some terms.
You can see the people online, yes?
Yeah, there is one question online.
Yeah, better. Professor also.
Like second.
Maybe I'll stop sharing so you can see the online.
Oh, yeah. Okay, can I ask my first question?
Yes, please, and slideshow.
First of all, Professor, thank you very much for sharing this excellent information about three of your very interesting projects. Personally, my research is, of course, very close to the first two of those projects, so I would like to ask many questions about those, but I think
Stop sharing. Stop sharing.
here maybe students are more interested in the third project, which is about youth, and I'm also quite interested in that too. What I would like to ask is, so, is it okay?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm wondering, of course, it's important to empower youth, and what do you do in this project in terms of like helping these youth organizations to get funding and to help them influence the decision making is very important. But I wonder, like, why do you need to measure their impact? Like, why is it kind of important? Like, and can you tell us a little bit more about this? Like, what exactly are you measuring? How are you doing that? As far as I saw, it's more like so youth who participate in some volunteering projects. So you want to measure like what have they achieved in those volunteering projects. So why is that important? I'm wondering. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so let's take a step back. We think youth contributions are very valuable and under-recognized. So by helping show the impact of young people, then it enables us to see their contributions to social and environmental change. The current program, the one I mentioned around the youth volunteer and service programming, if you look at most kind of funders and what they care about with youth programming, it's the training aspects, right? It's what did the youth learn? What are the new skills they gained? What knowledge did they gain? And that's all they do. So the evaluations out of those projects are really limited to the training aspects and skills built. But that's not why, I think it's one of the reasons youth join those projects. But actually, many times their main motivation is because they want to make a difference in the world. They want to help on the environmental aspects. They want to help on the social aspects. And so being able to look and say, did it work? How much impact did they have? How do we better design programs to increase success of their environmental impact? So let's say it's waste they're trying to address and behavior change. So youth are leading these initiatives. How successful are the initiatives? Do we only care that they got some leadership skills? No, we care waste got reduced and behavior changed. So this is why we want to get into measuring impact. For the same reason when we look at cities, we want to know, did it work, right? Like, so yes, they brought in new renewable energy, they've changed their transportation systems, but was it enough? Did it work? Same reason we want to measure impact, right? We want to see the inventories, we want to see real emissions to see if we're on the right trajectories. It's the same logic on the youth. So if I can get into the one study we did that isn't on, the 2015 study, what we did is we looked at historical records in newspapers and years of kind of youth impact. So it doesn't matter if they're youth today, it's when they had the impact they were young. And from that, we were able to analyze what level of impact did they have, what strategies worked best etc. And that is really good advice to today's leaders. Because what we found is the influence strategy is way more effective than the awareness raising strategy if you want to have a higher impact. Yet most young people start with awareness raising. They'll start with fairs and workshops, but if they really want to change policy, then the influence, joining a youth wing of a party or getting on a youth advisory committee, is way more effective at actually having an impact on policy than raising awareness with their peers. So that gives better advice to the young leaders of today of what has worked generation after generation that's accessible to young people. So did that answer?
Yeah, that's very interesting. But I'm still wondering how do exactly you measure the impact? Because sometimes it can be very abstract. For example, like awareness raising. How do you measure the impact of this awareness raising or influencing this decision? How do we actually know if youth have influenced the decision or not?
So we're using scale as a proxy. At what scale have they influenced? So did the awareness raising reach individuals? Did it reach the whole organization? Did it reach the whole sector? Did it reach the whole systemic change and then what led to policy shifts? So we're using scale as the proxy for that. And awareness raising or influence, those are the strategies. So they're not the impact, they're the means to get to the impact. Does that explain? So yeah, it's a bit kind of what equals scale. You can usually see it in terms of the policy level. So did it change the organization's policy and structures? Did it change the government, federal government's policy and structures? Then we're into systemic change.
Who replies to this scale? Is it the organization that kind of you reach out to the organization and you ask, like, oh, did this issue that you have raised reached you? Or you find it through some kind of I don't know, desk document research or something like that?
Yeah, so the 2015 study used newspaper articles, but the current work we're doing is surveying young people and surveying organizations. And essentially, we're never seeing systemic impact through those youth service programs. It's awareness raising or organizational level at best, because they're typically about 4 months long. So they don't have the long-term kind of movement engagement that's needed for a higher level impact. But what we can see is certain program design features. Like, does the program put the youth in contact with decision makers? As part of its design, is going to up the potential for that to be listened to, and for the programs to be understood. So it's allowing us to give some feedback on program designs to increase the potential for impact.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I still want to ask so many follow-up questions, but I think I should be with somebody else. I think we also have one question online though. Shall we go on there? Kaide-san, can you raise your question?
Thank you, Dr. Clarke. Thank you, Dr. Ialnazov, and everyone attending. My question is a bit more practical in its approach. In September of 2023, we had the African Climate Summit right here in Nairobi, which is quite incredible. But 2 weeks prior, there was the Youth African Climate Summit, which I was fortunate enough to have attended and participated in. And one of the things that came out was that, like you just said, the normal standard of, what can I say, youth leadership is kids come in, we train them, and then when they get older, we'll give them the tools and the power to do what they need to do. One of the things that came out of the Youth Climate Summit is that while the youth involvement is important, it faces a major roadblock whereby how do we convince these multi-sectoral partners and stakeholders that they need to relinquish a little more power, or what can I say, to give us some more tools to be more effective in strategy, what can I call it, strategy development or influence, even in the small things that we do. Is my question clear?
And very exciting about the Youth African Climate Summit and the feed in. The timing was right to feed in. The approach we've been taking with the adults that we're advising is that it's in their best interest to engage young people. Because young people are the innovation engine of our society. That's where the new ideas are coming from. It's where the longer term thinking, it's not embedded in the systems of the past. So it's in their best interest to listen to the young people. So it's in their interest to create space for that intergenerational engagement. So that as they're designing their future policies and their strategies, that they need to create a space for the youth voice within those. And ideally, put youth on the decision-making so that it's co-created. Did I answer your question?
I will try to apply it. If I do, you will notice the change. If I don't, I'll get back to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So our argument is it's in their best interest. So it's not a moral argument. Instead of saying, listen to the young people, we're saying, no, you're missing out on your innovation engine. You're missing out on really great thinking if you don't move force. So this is very dramatic.
That point did come out, but what we noticed is that most times, especially at government decision-making level, for any source of innovation or missing out on new insights and all that, they tend to turn to academia. They just go back to universities, go back to professors, research labs, think tanks, and all that, which have bare minimum youth implementation. So we are trying to break this ceiling somehow, or at least get some buy-in from all the decision makers.
Yes.
Bare minimum level, please involve the youth. Yeah.
Good. Well, let me know what. But actually, the African context, I think you're in one of the better positions with such a young population. And so much of the entrepreneurial thinking coming out of the youth. So in terms of the future and the sustainable development, a lot of it's going to come out of what the young people of today choose as their trajectory of careers and choices. So I think you have a lot more power maybe in that context than some other countries.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Shall we go to next?
So I'm very interested in your methodology. So I'm trying to measure the impact of Buddhist monasteries and local temples in Japan. And my fellow's questions were very interesting and your answers too. But I would still like to know more concretely who are the youth leaders you did research on? Where are they from? What do they do? What activities they do? And how did you decide that, okay, this will be my research subject? How did you get in contact, how do you get in contact with them? How do you decide, okay, these are youth leaders actually, and study? Yeah, thank you.
So I will say this study is in the Canadian context. So but it all depends on which study. We've done so many over the years, but let me use the one we've just done for funders. So a coalition of funders is interested to know who are the youth leaders of today. And what we did again was the newspaper search. So who is reaching mainstream or even non-mainstream news sources? And that enabled us to generate a list of kind of who in the last 3 years has reached mainstream news sources. And usually with young people, it says like 16-year-olds or this young person or student. There's often a term that goes with it in news stories, which you wouldn't necessarily see on an adult story. But with young people, their age tends to be played up. So we're able then to generate a list of over 100 people showing up in these news stories in the English and French, both mainstream and not so mainstream. And we're able to get into the archives through the academic library. So you can get at certain newspapers, not just current stories, but their archive stories, and do keyword searches. So we're able to do very specific keyword searches on topics, on age range, some other keywords like teenager or adolescent, or, the kinds of things that might pop up youth. And then from there, we can then start identifying who's showing up more in certain contexts. So then we can say, okay, this one's related to Indigenous rights. This one's related to Black Lives Matter. This one's showing up in relation to climate change. So we looked at across social and environmental topics. And then from there, we started looking at profiles and identifying, did they start their own organization, or are they leading a certain movement, student movement, or, and then made our short list. So we were looking for at least a provincial level, which is your prefecture level impact. So not just they made a difference in their high school, but they made a difference at their university. It needed to be at a higher level movement change for this particular search. And then from it, we shortlisted and then invited those who were willing to participate, and got some really amazing young leaders who were willing to be interviewed, and then matched them up with the funders so that we weren't the intermediary. They could directly talk to the funders about their challenges and interests. So does that answer?
Yeah, thank you very much.
So it becomes an ongoing, right? The youth leaders of today, that data is not accurate 5 years from now. Right? It's a new group that's coming up as those ones age out and move on in their lives and careers, etc. So it's an ongoing piece that we want to keep going with the funders with it. They know who the new wave is.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I rely heavily on public, but in Canada, the public is safe. So it wouldn't work in all countries.
Yeah, that's all. Well, yeah, that's true.
No. We also do for other things, like we create our youth council, it's a lot of word of mouth. Can you send this out to your young leaders? We want people to apply to our youth council. So it's an opt-in option for those young people. Please.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I gained a lot of new insights. I have two questions. The first one is, I saw in the slide regarding the NZAF,
Yeah,
NZAP,
we just call it NZAP.
and working groups. There was, in the policy tool section, there was a phrase, building codes, and I couldn't understand, but I'm interested.
Yeah, so I'll explain in the Canadian context better, maybe you can say if it's here as well. But building codes are a concept for buildings themselves. So we have certain standards. A building needs to be built, to be able to manage an earthquake, or to be able to be this energy efficient, or to be air quality of this standard. So there's standards around any house that's built or any tall building that's built, right? Has to meet these certain codes. And that's what a building code is. And therefore it would not be approved to be built unless it met this standard.
There are codes here.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're called specifically, but there are codes here,
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
especially for earthquakes.
But we're now seeing them come in, at least in Canada, on energy efficiency as well. And being net zero ready is kind of the next wave, to be able to plug in solar panels or to be able to have electric cars be charged off the new builds of homes.
Japan did that last
Great.
Thank you. The second question is, so I did an internship in Osaka World Expo for 2025, and this is the Expo. World Expo is one of the example of large events or mega events, such as Olympics and other kind of events, right? And this is just an idea, but not my only idea, but some discussion happens. Can we actually utilize such opportunity for the youth to gather and they come up with an outcome that is really impactful for the society? At the same time, I was just wondering that I think a lot of youth summits or youth events, they have discussions, they have presentation and so on, but what do you think is the real outcome after that? Because they usually have their own life, like they go back to the university or they're going to continue building their career. So I was just wondering what kind of real specific thing that could come up after such meetings of young people. Thank you.
Yeah, so a couple questions in there, but it partly just depends on the design of the youth event. So if it's awareness raising and kind of information sharing, then you're going to impact the individuals involved. If it's more of a training of, okay, how do you make change on your own university campus? And so it's aiming to be more of a stepping stone to building a network of change makers, then that youth event has more potential to have a stronger impact. So, because often young leaders need each other for that peer support. So sometimes these events are really good at developing the peer support and the ideas and skills that then that person can go on to make change in their community or in their institution or their workplace. And without that event, they wouldn't have the peer group, they wouldn't have the skills and confidence because they're not necessarily getting it anywhere else in their life. So, but it comes back to the design of the event. And then what ongoing kind of networking do they set up for people to help each other? On your other question about the World Expo, it also depends on what opportunities they've created for a youth voice in the decision making or youth stream in the expo. So often the first place to start is to kind of ask for that youth space. And or youth positions on decision making, etc. And then once you've opened that up, then you can feed content. But it's not uncommon that the very first ask from young people is, we need a voice, we need space, we need to be involved. And if that can get listened to, then you're one step closer to having impact internally. Did that help?
Yes, of course. Do you mind giving one example of an impact? Like, do they make a startup or anything?
Yeah. So I'll go back to the campus sustainability because that was my early days. And I started a national youth organization and we held events. But what we did is we pulled the kind of environmental youth leaders from each of the university campuses and brought them together in national or regional events. And it was very much a peer sharing of, okay, we've managed to put in this waste management program here, or we've managed to get this climate policy in here. And then we were profiling the kind of best stories from across the country, and then we were setting up kind of support for people to go back to their own campuses and institutionalize that. And through it, this was in the 90s, so it was just early days of sustainability thinking. And through it, we were able to get universities to do audits of their sustainability impacts. We're able to get them to put in sustainability policies, but coming from the student voice to push it in. And the early audits were done by students, so it wasn't done by staff yet. And then the next wave of what we were able to do is get the universities to hire people. So we're trying to institutionalize it in the institutions. So getting the universities to hire a sustainability coordinator then meant it wasn't on the students anymore, it was institutionalized. So once you have the staff person in place, it becomes their responsibility to implement the policy, to ensure the audits are done, etc. So it worked. So it came from the student movement. It came from us doing this on 80 campuses simultaneously, but kind of through leaders on each campus. And ultimately, you know, it created a lot of policy change that I still see today, because all those campuses still have their sustainability policy. They still have their sustainability coordinators. And now they've upped their game on climate. So that's my concrete example, and it's real. It's something we managed to do.
Thank you. I'm really interested. I'd like to read more about the papers that you've introduced. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. So in the first part, you're talking about the cross-sectional or collaborative movement to achieve sustainability. And in that context, you said the structures matter and community-wide engagement matter. And at that point, I wondered, what about the perspective of the decision-making system? And I thought, does the variations of decision-making system in collaborative movement make difference or not? And possibly answer.
Yes. So the simple answer is yes, but I haven't empirically proven it. So what I'm seeing on the empirical is it's part of the design. So if you set up a partnership that has shared decision-making, for example, we have local government plus some of the very key employers in the region sharing decision-making on the community vision, on the overseeing of the implementation. That has a whole other level of engagement and potential for implementation. So that then feeds whether those same companies and employers want to be involved in the implementation. Versus if you keep the decision-making only in the government and you set it up more as a consultation, but only the government gets to make the final decisions, then the buy-in from the partners to implement is much lower because they're advising the government on what the government should do, and therefore don't feel the same kind of collective responsibility to help achieve the goals. So those are two very different decision-making structures that I've seen commonly of kind of shared multi-stakeholder entity versus government keeps control. And it definitely has impacted the outputs that I've seen kind of, but I'm basing that on kind of thinking of the stories I know. When we tested in the survey results, we definitely saw some of the structural features, and that oversight entity showed up both times, the government one and the partnership one. So that speaks to the decision-making structure.
Yeah. The difficult thing is, as you get more participants who have a decision-making power, it's very difficult to decide something. Yeah.
So this is why I was so interested in these big partnerships. Right? They don't have 1,000 partners on their decision-making, but they've set up tiers of roles for partners. So there's a core group, the steering committee. It depends on the city if they're chosen from their business people, put their business people on there, or whether it's kind of selected of, we know you're key in this space. But then there's another tier. So the next tier is around the implementation group. So in Barcelona, Guangzhou, Montreal, what they share in common is all of the partners are committed to implementing. Doesn't mean they're part of decision making. So they probably inputted in the original plan, but then they're not doing the oversight ongoing. What they're doing is committing to help implement. So in Montreal, what they did is they asked their 300 partners to commit to at least 3 actions of a whole series of options. And to remain a partner, you had to implement on at least 3 actions. But you can see that's a whole other level compared to the steering committee, which also existed. But then every 5 years, they revisit the plan and invite comments from the rest. So this is why I like the large ones, because you get into much more complicated designs. And then how those partners are engaged and how you enable their commitment. So in Montreal, you had a report once a year. Did I achieve my 3? Or am I still working on it? How much did I achieve? And then they collect all of that into reports on, so many trees were planted, so many bike racks were added, so many fleets of cars were green, so many solar panels added. Because these are the actions that various companies or universities or organizations would commit to. Yes, please.
Following on that, what share just do 3 and what share do more? If they're set at that minimum level, are they just doing that, or are you getting perceived like overachievers?
Are definitely overachievers. And part of the challenge is making sure that companies that have a certain type of impact aren't picking different actions. So a company with a very high energy footprint is choosing to address waste, for example. So Montreal had to come up with another strategy on climate in particular, because the actions being committed to were we'll put in a green wall, but didn't actually address too big energy footprint. So there definitely has to be kind of a thinking of, is this the right scale and the right opportunity to achieve our overarching goals? But still you get the engagement, and it's a lot more collective action, a lot more bike racks get put in, a lot more trees get than would be if it was only government leading it.
In Montreal, are you counting the seasonal stuff? Because they famously do their big pedestrian area, but it's only for summer. And then 8 months of the year, it's all cars.
You'd have to look into the Montreal plans, but on transportation, they've gotten very progressively. So it's, even thinking through kind of last mile freight deliveries, but mobility and kind of de-emphasizing the car has been a trend for quite a while. But it's all voluntary. So these collective action initiatives, that's their boundary, is there's no mandatory element of you must participate. There's a real kind of social capital to being involved and a desire to help your community, and you're kind of tapping into that. And directing it for a common vision. But you also need the mandatory to kind of follow up on certain aspects. So I'll just add, because a number of you are focused on specific, like renewable energy or transportation. I suspect there's cross-sector partnerships happening also in those. So it may not be 100 partners. It might be 3 or 4. So it might be kind of government plus this utility plus this company. But watch for it, because as soon as we get into these complicated topic areas, it's typically one organization can't do it alone. And so what you'll see is that each has kind of come up with a collective vision of how we're going to address this together, and then divide and conquer the responsibilities of, well, the private sector can handle this bit, and the utility can handle this, and the government can handle this. And collectively, we're going to achieve, whether it's waste management or transportation, etc. So it's what I'm studying in terms of cross-sector partnership, and that design is equally important for kind of 5 partners as it is for 100. It's just different designs.
Check something with the chat.
Nothing. Can I ask one?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe the last one, because we already exceeding our time.
What's the name?
I'm wondering if Have you touched in your research the political, like going back to the topic of the youth, have you touched in your research the political side of it, especially related to the so-called aging society? So I'm wondering, it kind of makes sense to suggest that the more aging society is, the more reluctance you will be to, put the youth on the decision-making boards. And yeah, so I'm wondering, do you observe the trend in Canada of like this more reluctance, or is it vice versa that there is actually more acceptance and more progressive policy making in this sense?
Yeah, we're huge on intergenerational collaboration, so I would never say change the word altogether. You absolutely need the intergenerational aspects of different age groups to see different perspectives. But having a young person on that board enables that long-term thinking that an aging person won't be in the same headspace. They're just, because their time frame of their thinking is more immediate. Where a younger person is more likely to bring up climate change, for example, because of the time frame of how much they can see the extreme weather events are going to increase in their lifetime versus how we manage resilience now. So I'm not quite answering your question, but what I see more is it depends on the sector. So you asked about government, but what we see is the tech sector, for example, is very open to young people in the decision making because of that innovation engine. So if I was back to where are you going to get your new ideas, where's the radical innovation coming from? It's going to be the young people who are in the R&D, the research and development hubs. And if you look at the tech sector and you look at the research and development hubs, they're hiring right out of the universities, co-op students, really young. You're not seeing a whole lot of 40, 50, 60, 70-year-olds sitting in the research and development hubs. And that's because they realize their innovation engine is young people. But while the tech sector sees that, you don't see it so much in the incumbent and the traditional sectors, like forestry or agriculture. They're not quite as kind of looking for new ideas, but they still have the potential to create kind of intergenerational opportunities to hear from their young workforce and what are the needs and thinking of the youth. So on government, we're definitely seeing youth advisory councils at different levels of government that are quite effective and listened to. But I don't know that it's an age thing in government, right? That's an institution. But I am seeing it on sector level, a really big difference on how different industrial sectors are open to tapping into the young workforce. You can see it now that I say it. You can see what I'm saying, right? Around the tech and the newer sectors are very much driven by young people.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. For tech, it definitely makes sense that there are a lot of young people. But still, it kind of, to me, it feels like young people are more getting involved in the implementation rather than making the decisions. Especially talking about government. Yeah, tech sector, I agree with other sectors in the government, especially in the aging societies. I think maybe the trend is reversing, but I'm not sure. It's just my hunch. That's not my research, so I don't know.
Yeah, and there are ways of building your innovation systems internally where you can listen to your junior employees. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're putting them into a senior leadership role without going through the steps, but you're creating opportunity for comment and input from various perspectives as part of your systems. So that all back to design, program design. It's a common theme here for me.
Thank you very much.
Really my pleasure. And I'm glad we had the opportunity to go around as well, so I could hear more about the exciting research you're all doing as well.
Okay, so yeah, I think there are also many other questions, but time is limited, so we have to put a stop somewhere. So, yeah, again, thank you very much, Professor Clarke, for your very great presentation and insightful discussion. Please join me in some applause. If I understand correctly, it's your vacation.
Yes.
So she's spending some time for vacation with us. It's amazing. So, and yeah, if you have some other questions which could not be answered this time, please reach out to us, to me or further, and we will get back to you with some answers. And yesterday we had some discussion with further and Professor Clarke, and it seems there is quite a lot of potential for joint research, like some comparison between Canadian municipalities and Japanese municipalities. So I hope this is not the end, and it's a beginning of some new cooperation. And I'm very much looking forward to it, and I invite all of you to join if there is a wish and opportunity. Okay, so that will be all for today. Thank you very much.
Okay, so, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way.
Is everyone on LinkedIn?